it just you, me, and Roxanne?
Can you hear us?
Hey,
Can you hear
Roxanne.
me now?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Hi, Nathan. You all right, darling?
Very well, very well. How do you want to do this then? Do you want me on camera on your recording, or what do you want to do?
We can hear you. We can hear you. Yep, we can hear you.
You can.
Yep.
I can't hear you, so I must have something wrong with headset or something. Let's take that out.
Sorry,
Speak.
Nate.
No, I can't hear that.
Sometimes this happens.
How
What
weird is
happens?
that? Audio and video settings. We just had a call just now and everything was fine.
Absolutely.
Right, microphone, that's all sorted. Speakers, we don't want that. We want this. I've got it. For some reason, the call settings on that one. So, Nathan, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hey, good stuff.
Lovely. Do you know what? I feel like it's another 5-star general we're speaking. I feel like I'm in the presence of greatness, Nath.
Oh, come on! Don't butter me up too much.
I can't help it. I can't help it. Like you're like one of the 5-star generals, Nathan. I feel like I'm in an episode of Wayne's World. I might break out into "I'm not worthy."
You're making me blush.
Excellent. So thanks for agreeing to do this, Nathan. It's nice that we can finally connect like this, because it was all a bit too brief at the convention for me. So it's nice to properly meet you.
Cool.
And what we'll do is, I don't know if you're happy to put the camera on, but we will premiere at some point. And we will do.
Yeah,
we'll do the podcast dropping on audio. One second, my son's just come in. What is it at? She's gone out to get a haircut. All right. Yeah. So what we do is we'll do like the interview section of the podcast, and then Roxanne and I'll stay on and do like the intro bits and various other top and tail bits, and then we cut it with a track, a bit of music, and then we publish it on the podcast platforms, so iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play. And then shortly after, at an agreeable time for your good self, we'll pop it on YouTube as a premiere on either Roxanne or my channel. So that'll mean we get to interact, and if you're free, you can join us that for that hour and a half. The combined time for the show will be about 90 minutes, but the interview section will be about 60, if that's okay.
So about an hour now.
From now, yeah. If we got cracking fairly soon, we'll be done at 5:30.
Fine.
Is that going to be all right?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Awesome.
Did you say you wanted to turn the camera off?
I don't mind. I don't know how it looks, because it's just my secondary camera, which is a bit rubbish, to be honest. I can't really see it. It's so tiny in the little corner. I mean, if I look presentable and you're happy the way I am, I'll probably.
You do indeed, darling. You look nice and relaxed there.
Excellent. If you're happy, I'm happy.
We've got a 5-star general on the throne. We're winning. We are winning.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, I can't see the camera. That's really weird. I wonder why. Do I have to minimize that?
I feel like the adjustment bureau is doing a number again, Robin.
Probably not. It's just the layout. I'm not used to having to shuffle multiple grid view, speaker view. Probably speaker view is a better idea, isn't it? Because then the person speaking gets. Let's do that, because I think because if I start recording, there we go. I'll start recording, and then it should record the main speaker. So
before you do, I'll nip to the loo, because I've been sat out for the last.
Oh yeah, please do. Yeah.
Go for it, my darling. Go for it. Robin. We're like a pair of kids, aren't we?
Oh, we are.
Yeah. I do mean that, though. Genuinely feels like 5-star general is in the building.
Yeah, definitely. A ball crusher.
Yeah, there you go. It doesn't feel intimidating, but it's like this is probably what it feels like like interviewing Mike Tyson or something. You know, man served a few knockouts.
Yeah.
So I feel like, I've got my ears pinned back.
So are you happy that we're halfway down the show notes where it's the yellow bit saying the break is here.
Yeah, so and then go, now it's time to bring on our special guest to kick off season 3.
That's it.
Cool.
Were you seeing Nathan's face then? When he was talking? Oh, that's funny. I'm not. I want to make sure that that's not happening when we do the recording.
So look, stop the recording now. Stop it and then play it back in the chat. You can do it really quickly. Now it'll go into the chat. Give it 2 seconds and look in the chat. When it comes up in the chat, this is what I do as a quick sound check. You'll hear Nathan saying, "Can I go to the toilet?" It'll come up completely different on the recording. You'll see.
Okay, hold on. There's the chat.
I'll shut up when you listen to it so I don't confuse it. Just tell me when you're about to play it for you.
Okay, open video.
Yeah, have a look. Yeah.
Ah, yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
It's weird, that, isn't it? It correlates it properly, regardless whether you've got it on speaker, view, or whatever view. It'll do it automatically. Cool. All right. So whenever you're ready, you can hit record again, and then hopefully it'll go nice and smoothly.
Okay. Start recording. There we go.
Cool.
I'm ready whenever you are.
Thanks.
Lovely. Thank you, darling.
We just did a test just to check that did maximize the right thing when you're speaking. So let's start. So we haven't done a show for a little bit, and this is us sort of kicking off the what we were going to call season 3. So I'll start, and we'll bring you in shortly, Nathan. So
cool.
Now it's time to bring on our special guest to kick off season 3, content creator, the most formidable debater on the plane with almost 1,000 debate shows under his belt and a phenomenal track record of seeing off all comers. It's Nathan Oakley. How are you doing today, Nathan?
Very well. Thank you very much for having me.
Yay!
You're very welcome. It's great to have you on the show. And I had to stop myself and think, there must be one or two people, just one or two out of the thousands in the community that may not be aware of your journey and how you got here. So I wondered if you wouldn't mind just humouring us for a minute or two, just to tell us a little bit about you and how you got to where you are today, a little bit about your journey to date, if you will.
Where do you want me to start?
How about where you're from? And
tell us your name and where you come from, Pet.
Where you're from and what started you on your pursuit of truth, if you like.
Okay. My flat Earth journey started by watching a Math Powerland video and instantaneously recognising the truth when he mentioned 2 words, flat Earth. So up until that point, I'd only ever heard anybody utter the words flat Earth in scorn or in ridicule, and he didn't, and the way he said it resonated with me in such a way that it was like the way people describe how you'd be if you were in a horrendous accident and your life flashes before your eyes. The same thing happened with me, but with all of the journeys that I'd made when I was a representative for an electronics manufacturer many years before, and I was travelling all over the world, and unlike a lot of people who would spend the vast majority of their air travel time sat looking at either the screen in front of them, watching some crap movie on some low-res screen with headphones that you can't hear anything, or sleeping, or getting drunk, or whatever. Whereas I would leave my seat as soon as the seatbelt light went out and go to the very back of the plane, because you could get a wider angle on, obviously the windows are the same size, but you could get a better angle looking out over the flat plane, and having a good idea of the rhetoric that was out and how they explained how the sphere worked with the mathematics of the sphere. I understood implicitly that at cruising altitude on an airliner, you can't see a reification of a curve in the horizon. Phrase my words carefully. But nonetheless, what I would observe would be a vast flat plane expanding out in all directions from those windows of those planes. And the thought that went through my mind was, I wish I could get higher. I wish I could see the curve. Not realising that I'd be reifying the horizon into an actual position that would make any difference if it was curved or not. But nevertheless, that was what I would think about, going higher and seeing actual curve, knowing that you couldn't from those altitudes. So when Matthew Powerland pointed it out in the way he did, I was like, yeah, that makes complete sense. The Earth is obviously and observably flat. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've experienced it every day I've been awake. And at that moment, I went into my wife. It was very late at night, and woke her up and told her. I was like, yeah, it's flat. And she quickly went back to sleep.
Yeah, until months later. So bring us a little bit further forward, if you will, to just say, what took you to your content creation days, and tell us about those early days.
Well, I've been making content on YouTube for a lot longer than I've been doing flat Earth videos. So I've been making YouTube content for about 11 years.
Okay.
The transition from making videos about electronics to making videos about flat Earth was born out of the want to actually make flat Earth into something that I made my videos about. So I wanted a subject matter that had longevity to make videos about, and I was toying with various other ideas about various other subjects that I could cover, maybe psychopathy or predictive programming, things that I was looking at the time. And then flat Earth came along, and I was like, this is absolutely ideal, completely niche. And I wanted to be a YouTuber, obviously having done it for so many years unsuccessfully. You can imagine that's obviously where my ambitions lay. So that's not something I've ever denied to my audiences either. First and foremost, I am a YouTuber. That's what I consider myself. My subject as a YouTuber is flat Earth.
Fantastic. So your channel started, you got going with some content, and then you started the debates roughly when, would you say? 2015, 16 perhaps?
No, it's a couple of years ago now. So what are we now, 19? So it'd be something like August, September-ish, 2017. Coming up on 2 years now, after 2 years of debates. Wow.
And Roxanne, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to ask you again about your earlier content regarding the flat Earth side of things. Who were your early challengers regarding that? Sorry.
My early challengers were probably people in the comment section. So at the time I first started making videos, there was very few people watching or commenting. But there was trolls. So the only one I can remember that would be of note today would be Sly Sparkane. One of my first ever commenters was Sly Sparkane, who I put him in what I called Oakley cage. I chuck him in some Cavendish balls to play with.
Your first shows really did seem to have hordes of challenges. If you can just emphasize a little bit more about the early days and how your show developed as a result of the first few shows.
Do you mean the challenges on the debate itself, in terms of the early debates with people trying to porn bomb it and things like that? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Well, it does definitely precede that. I kind of gathered by the way you phrased it that you meant that. But, I mean, prior to that, I'd done other open public shows that now I look back on it were far more risky in terms of the way I did them. So before doing the open platform of the debate, I did Tracking the Sun on a Flat Earth Live. Not exactly the most catchy of titles. But I did, in terms of the amount of hours, not non-stop because it was two separate 24 hours non-stop, but 48 hours approximately of non-stop tracking the sun. And that was done by way of a link to a Google Hangouts on Air going out to the public. So it was extremely high risk. These days, most people are trying to protect their links, right? Keep them out of the public's hands.
Basically, yeah.
Well, back in the day, I intentionally, knowing those risks, put that out, at my own risk to attain the information I wanted in terms of sun tracking. So that was the way I played it back in the day, a lot more fast and loose than I do now. But yeah, to answer your question, the original days of the debates were, similar in the respect that people wanted to come on and disrupt the show, and that sort of thing has been ironed out in terms of production. It's not actually that interesting, I've got to be honest, in terms of how the show runs.
So you've got you talked about sending links out, and you had a format. Did you have a panel that you agreed on the Globe Lie side? Or as in the flat Earth side, did you have a panel you agreed on, or was that just open as well?
Just open to anybody. It always has been, so that's still the case now. Okay. So as much as I praise the panel members who are what I would call on my side, none of them are a permanent fixture. They're all free to come and go as they choose and do. So there is no permanent panel, although it may seem that way. But if you went back, I don't know, 200 shows, you'd see a very different panel than there is now. And that has always been the case. So initially it was just me. Most of the early shows I stayed very quiet because I was totally overwhelmed by globeheads that had decided to join. So it's normally, if there's a panel of 10, it would be 9 globeheads and me.
Interesting. So it was you take on all comers really, and you had to quickly sharpen your trade. I bet you had to, because I remember back in 2017, I felt I wasn't equipped to answer some of the arguments out in street activism, and it's particularly things like gravity and a perspective. We've seen the debate show bring us the answers over the years. So if you could go back to the early days, like if you don't mind, were there one or two guests that you thought, right, this argument needs refining? It's something that needs some more meat on the bone.
Yeah, all of them. Yeah, all of the arguments. Most of the arguments I stepped into the arena with when I first started doing the debate were wrong. Okay. And a lot of those are being perpetuated now. In fact, I literally just discussed this on the most recent debate, so 997. Gives you an idea of how many we've done. But on that debate, I was talking about, you go back, I'll use the example I used on the show, although it's a little bit ham-handed for this example, but I'll just use it because it's fresh in my mind. So we were talking about 4 years ago, you'd watch an expose on Back to the Future. You go, look, there's an azimuth equidistant projection in the background as a clock. The truth in plain sight. Now we'd say, well, models are pseudoscience, and the reason the cinematographer in that instance has planted that particular image, if it's to be deemed part of predictive programming, would be so that us as flat earthers who hold up the azimuthal equidistant projection of a globe as a flat earth model have essentially offered up their own straw man for the globe side to burn. So it's a secondary layer below the Formica deep original impression you're given by truth in plain sight. Same goes for a whole number of examples, the UN flag or whatever you like, but any of these global projections that are held up as flat earth, well, models are pseudoscience. They're not going to ever represent your world. That's a reification fallacy. But that quite advanced argument, and although I said it quite concisely then, might go over a lot of people's heads. They'll just go, well, what's wrong with saying flat earth map's flat earth? It's just a map, right? And it looks a bit like what earth might be. Well, no, it's a reification fallacy. We don't live on a model. Those models have been given to us from one source, a global source. There's tens of thousands of them. None of them are accurate, and none of them represent our world. And the fact that we have some that you can look at and say, this works in this way, but not in that way, it's all meaningless. It doesn't represent our world, and we've been deceived about the way our world is represented. So are you going to find any truth in those holes? Nope.
No.
No. So one of the things that I noticed you were doing was just for humour's sake is putting a toe tag on the thumbnail for somebody who may have just had a roasting in the Flat Earth Debates Lion's Den. So do you mind humouring us? And if we mention a name, see if you can remember what that particular debate show was about and what made it a defeat. So if I say Mick West, for instance, can you describe why Mick came into the den and walked away with a toe tag?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Mick West has he's got several now, but at the time he had a curve calculator, now dubbed the Begging the Question, Proof of Nothing Perspective Hijacking Curve Calculator. And upon him describing two aspects in the discussion with myself and Sleeping Warrior, Anthony Riley, subscribe today, Sleeping Warrior channel. He's just tipped over 4,000 as of, I believe you, Roxanne, you've just tipped over 4,000, haven't you?
Well done.
Have I? I thought I was still at 399.
Maybe I'm a bit premature. I'm really sorry.
I was congratulating him for the four grand on the sub there. That's perfect. Shout out to Sleeping Warrior, and well said. Sub to him today if you haven't done so already.
So him and myself and Sleeping Warrior were discussing two aspects. One was the original presupposition that the model is based on, which is the R value, and the other is the secondary, how would you call it, begging the question fallacy on steroids. So that would be 7/6R terrestrial refraction. So Nick West came in to try and defend his use of a presupposition within his calculator, and his justification was to say it's the standard model. So yeah, he walked out with the toe tag because he essentially confirmed what we already know. The begging the question proof of nothing perspective hijacking curve calculator is a begging the question calculator because it uses the R value, which is the radius of Earth, which is a presupposition.
Can I say something? Because that really does feel like the supercalifragilisticexpialidocious of flat Earth. Can you just, without me interrupting you, can you just say that sentence again for me?
I'll break it down for you. So you've got the begging the question. Well, the begging the question element is the assumption of a radius. And what that means is to beg the question is to assume your outcome. Well, what the curve calculator, clue should be in the title, is trying to prove is that there's a curve. Well, it's a curve calculator. So it's already assuming that the Earth is a sphere, and every calculation that comes out of that calculator will be a curve outcome. So it's automatically assuming the outcome. It proves nothing. So begging the question, proof of nothing. So that's the first section. Perspective hijacking. So the effect that they call Earth curve is merely the effect of perspective. We have a limit to our vision based on the aperture that you view things through, either your own eye or a lens of a camera, and you can calculate that with the Rayleigh criterion to produce a figure at which you will lose information, the diffraction limit. And the diffraction limit is the point that you would lose the resolution to resolve something that you're viewing in the far distance, for example. Usually at the point of the horizon, the arbitrary point where the sky appears to meet the ground and not actual location. So this point where things disappear is utilised and reified into the leading edge of a sphere, when in reality it's merely the effect of perspective, the vanishing point. So they take that point and turn it into the edge of a sphere that things are disappearing over. So perspective hijacking curve calculator. So it's the begging the question, proof of nothing, perspective hijacking, Earth curve calculator.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you for indulging us in that. Thank you.
I like it. I like it when you held his foot to the flame, Nathan. And I remember Mick's agreeing, but with the most feeble of, yeah. That was all he could give away when you were forcing him to admit what he was doing. So well done for that, because that was a serious scalp.
Bravo.
Roxanne, why don't you ask the next one?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you if you could talk us through one of your most memorable shows. If you have some memorable shows in your mind, could you maybe share some of those with us?
Probably the most memorable shows were around 77, 78, that sort of number, and maybe a few thereafter, when early on, very, very green to the subject, nowhere near as concisely summarising these points like I am now, we were at the point where we didn't actually appreciate how the curve calculator had hijacked perspective. Though those words had never crossed our lips, we didn't appreciate that as soon as you use the calculator, you're into assuming the outcome. You're always going to get an Earth curve at the end of every result, and we're arguing about how much or how little once processed through that calculator. So that's the stage we're at in that particular show, and the tool that we're using is models. So we're using Blender, and we're modelling the Isle of Man, an observation again made by Sleeping Warrior, subscribe today, and his observation is being put through the Earth curve calculator. We're saying how much should or shouldn't be there, and arguing about the heights that the camera was at when processing the height information through the curve calculator, and so on and so forth. And from there to maybe show 200, there or thereabouts, through that process, so it's not exactly a single show, we reached that conclusion. So Ranty produced some images that go on the show daily. They're presented, they don't get discussed because people just see them as background images. They kind of blur into the background now, which is good, because occasionally they'll come up. But what Ranty did was he had an observation of some wind turbines, and he's got them going into the distance, and as they do so, they reduce in size, as you would expect with perspective. But that effect is described by the globetards as these turbines going over the curve of the Earth. So Ranty went and got a side elevation of the exact same turbine. So he's got one that looks down the line and one that looks along them. And of course, when you're looking along them, they're absolutely and completely and perfectly straight. But when you look down the line of them, they're cascading into the distance with perspective, otherwise known as Earth curve. And it was around that sort of time that we suddenly realised what was being done. Because Anthony's arguing, and the title of the calculator, or our title for the calculator, slightly changed. So it went from perspective denying Earth curve calculator to perspective hijacking curve calculator, because we recognised that at the time Anthony's saying you should include the effects of perspective. How will you engineer the effects of perspective into the calculator? When in reality, the calculator itself has just taken the effects of perspective and then called them Earth curvature. And that was probably be my favourite moment. You know, beyond that, we've got, further moments when we realise that models are pseudoscience anyway, and it's a reification fallacy to use them. But around that time, it would have been too soon to just recognise the fallacy of reification, rather than recognising how the calculators actually deceived people. It was quite magical to see how they'd done it. It was, you're suddenly impressed by the magic trick that they've used to pull the wool over your eyes and convince you that the effect of perspective is actually an Earth curve that you don't have. Amazing. But that was a cool moment.
Do you mind? That is amazing. I remember that too, and it was a significant time, because then Mick West had to correct his own calculator, didn't he? Could you walk us through an episode with Conspiracy Cats where we went through gravity as a force? And it might have been Fight the Flat Earth as well. I think Tony took him on as well. But do you mind going through that particular aspect of the argument, if you can remember?
Sure. That's fairly quick to summarise. So to assert that gravity is a force is simply wrong. It's about 100 years out of date. So the Reverend John Michell and Cavendish created an experiment, which it's not, to give you this force of gravity. Now this has been superseded by Einsteinian pseudo-Ramonian force space. So instead of Euclidean length, breadth and depth, you've now got there should be a big clue in that, pseudo-Ramonian force space, length, breadth, depth and time. Now time, as you may be aware, is a concept, and space-time, a conceptual medium, being bent gives rise to a not actual force called gravity. So gravity is not a force, and anybody who asserts such is about 100 years out of date. So just to summarise that, the current bullshit is Einsteinian bullshit. Now, just to pour a little bit salt on that, that's not even the current science, which we might come to later, we'll see. It's quantum science that we're dealing with now, not Einsteinian. But the current globe rhetoric, know thy bullshit, globeheads, is Einsteinian bullshit. And that's what they should be asserting in terms of what gravity is. That's the current pseudoscience of the day. That's the accepted pseudoscience, Einsteinian pseudoscience.
It's amazing how many people quote Newtonian though when you back them into a corner. Even at Speaker's Corner, we had a guy, and I was there with What Shape Is the World, and we literally felt like we were on your panel online. We didn't know which way. It was like baby go left, baby go right, baby go left, and What Shape Is the World gave him a couple of clues, and I was like, don't do that, don't make it easy for him. He'll come to the right conclusion of the wrong conclusion, if you know what I mean. And no, he walked straight into it, and these people are so confident when they start, aren't they, Nathan? Yeah. They're so confident and end up going, like you said, down a BS route that's the current BS of the BS.
Yeah. We had a physics teacher in Bath who started with Cavendish. And I said, I need faith to go from 2 balls in a barn to water around a ball. And in the end, he had all these science students around him. He said, you know what? It's unfair coming to argue with you. I thought, I've got a physics teacher who's deliberately taken his entire class out to have a bit of fun with some activists on the street. And I said, what do you expect me to do? Not prepare? It was funny, but yeah, for sure. That was a good episode. And I'm glad you guys have really nailed this argument because, like I said, in the past, I've not felt equipped to do it because it is, you need a relative amount of sophistication to get through it. So if you can dumb it down and make it simple, but it's great to know you guys have taken on, so-called debaters and held them to account on it and shone a light on all the inconsistencies, which is brilliant. So I remember you had another really good one about pseudoscience, I think. Bob the Science Guy. Do you want to tell us about that one?
Well, Bob the Pseudoscience Guy would be more accurately described as Bob the Fallacy Guy. So,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, whenever pseudoscience Bob appears, he just uses an endless string of logical fallacies which tend to get picked apart, and he's been toe tagged a couple of times. But yeah, Bob the Fallacy Guy doesn't really have a great deal of science, unfortunately. In fact, he has absolutely none. Probably wouldn't understand what science was if it bit him in the ass.
Go ahead, Roxanne.
As I'm choking on my coffee and trying not to laugh as you're saying that, Nathan, so sorry. I would like to jump down the list a little bit, Robin, because we're getting a bit of grief from this guy at the moment.
Okay.
He's really picking on us at the moment, and I'd love you to reminisce with us a little bit about your dealings with Simon Dan. I was going to say another name, but it's all right. I'll say Simon Dan.
Well, so far I've only had one interaction with Simon Dan, and that was quite recent. So, by coincidence, Twitter. I'm not a social media user. I do tweet out my shows, and I'll send them out on Facebook, whatever the means is that they give you on YouTube to do so. But when I was sharing one of the debates, I happened to notice that there was a tweet at me from Simon Dan. Now, this is going to get slightly complicated. He's coming into the tail end of a conversation, or debate, if you will, about Coriolis effect. Mm-hmm. So, this is going to be complicated. You'll have to bear with me. The asserted global rhetoric in regards to Coriolis effect is that Earth has Coriolis effect observable. This is detailed by people like Neil deGrasse Tyson. So I'm not agreeing with this assertion. I'm just explaining their rhetoric. Mm-hmm. You'll understand why shortly. So their rhetoric is to say that a footballer kicks a field goal, and because the ball leaves an Earth that's spinning, as you observe that ball, which actually is travelling in a straight line, as you observe it, it seems to take a curved path, because the Earth rotates underneath the ball. So you're moving underneath the ball after it's kicked, as are the goalposts, meaning that a field goal will be scored because the goalposts move underneath the ball. Or if you're watching it, the ball seems to curve because the ground's moving underneath it, causing a field goal to go in. Now that's the assertion by Globe priest Neil deGrasse Tyson. Earth turns underneath the football. So this is, like I say, it's going to get complicated, take a little bit of time to explain. So that's the asserted rhetoric. That's the standard. That's what's accepted if you believe you are on a globe. That the Earth rotates underneath things that leave what is called the non-inertial spinning reference frame, i.e. the globe Earth is the spinning reference frame, the ball leaves it, and the Earth rotates underneath. The problem with that assertion is that would also apply to an aeroplane, a drone, a bullet, or anything else that leaves a claim to be non-inertial spinning reference frame of a sphere Earth. If a plane has the Earth rotating underneath it, as is asserted by way of this Coriolis effect, then if you travelled from, say, Charlotte, North Carolina to LA, roughly on the same latitude line, you would arrive in about 1.5 hours. Because the Earth rotates underneath you and your destination's travelling towards you as you travel towards it. Now, that's the cause of Coriolis effect, Earth rotating underneath the ball. The Coriolis effect itself is where the people in the trenches who come to the debate want to argue about that effect, rather than the cause of that effect, which would be Earth rotating underneath. Obviously, Earth does not rotate underneath a football when it's in the air for 2 seconds, because if it did, you'd have shortened travel time. Now, this is where it gets ultra complicated. Because you don't see Earth rotate underneath a drone or underneath a helicopter or underneath an aircraft, then you've got to justify why we don't see Coriolis deviation. In other words, Earth doesn't give you Coriolis effect. Planes aren't deviating, helicopters aren't having the ground move away from them while they hover. It's a contradiction in terms. They're hovering. So, to get around this, the people who come to the trenches will argue that you have a conservation of the momentum that's being retained upon leaving the reference frame, i.e. no Coriolis effect, a defiance of what priests like Neil deGrasse Tyson say happens. In order to justify why we don't have reduced flight times, or drones can hover and helicopters can hover, they say, oh, well, it's retaining the momentum. Well, in so doing, number one, they're defying Coriolis effect. So get back to Scientism. Scientism tweets a picture of somebody bouncing up and down on a trampoline whilst being towed along by a tractor. Now, my point to Scientism is, you as the globe head in this argument are supposed to be arguing that we do see deviation. That's what's supposed to prove Earth spins. The deviation that you're supposed to see. And he's giving us an example that's showing no deviation. So what's he doing? He's giving us an argument that proves the rebuttal to us not having the deviation that needs to be there if Earth was rotating underneath. So it's about 6 steps removed when he's asserting, here's an example of no deviation. Well, fundy idiot, you need deviation. You're supposed to be fighting for Coriolis. But Scientism's a complete idiot and doesn't understand his own argument.
Yeah, he's put the kit on and gone and hit the goal in the wrong corner, hasn't he? Silly Billy.
Basically.
What a silly Billy.
I've seen a great clip recently. I'm going to play it on one of our shows, which is a guy takes out, I think it's a full hunting rifle, and he shoots up in the air, and he does 5 shots really quickly in the air, and then he runs away and hides. And they come down like with the most amazing force, and you can hear them. You can hear the rifling as it comes down. It whistles, and it hits the ground with 5 thuds, and they are pretty close to where they've been fired. You know, it's only down to the angle that you managed to shoot them up as to where they came down. So that's the upward trajectory, and then you've obviously got the railgun, which is 100 miles with virtually, you know, it's just. Gradual loss of momentum. I think it's Mach 4 when it finishes and Mach 8 or 9 when it starts. Crazy amounts of momentum.
Okay.
So are there any other, if I just rattle off a list of some of your opponents that have had toe tags, do you let me know if there's any that you think are particularly relatable or something that you can bring up. So we've had Wolfie 6020, is it his name? Slice Barcane.
I can't remember what the point for Wolfie was. Slice Barcane. Yeah, sure. Do you want me to start there?
Go for it.
So Slice Barcane is a science denier, or illiterate in terms of how science works, and he would assert that he is doing scientific experimentation, and then he's come on the show when we've pointed out that he doesn't have any understanding or the slightest comprehension of what science actually is, to offer us a hypothesis for his experiment. Now, this is ass about face, because to start with, you don't have an experiment as the step that you start with in the scientific method. You start with an observed phenomena, you then formulate a hypothesis to try and explain what you think causes the effect. You formulate it with a null, which is the antithesis of your original prediction, i.e. if A, not B, rather than if A, then B. And once you've got a hypothesis and a null, you can go forward to set up an experiment. So it's, you know, at the least step 3 if you've got the most simplified version of the scientific method. But fundies like Slice Barcane start with an experiment and then explain with just so stories what their experiment, in quotes, does. So Slice Barcane doesn't understand science. It was quite good fun pointing out to him that he didn't even have a hypothesis, and an experiment is a hypothesis test. And he didn't have a hypothesis, but did have an experiment, apparently. Idiot.
We love the way that Tony wades into these arguments as well, and obviously with his recent project, he's been able to cite loads of great references and bring them into, I guess, bring them into a lot of your debates, which is great. How about a couple more names? The Rumpus, Soundly.
Rumpus has had endless toe tags. The most recent was literally in the last couple of days. He declared that he would never say that the entropy does not apply to Earth. So entropy being the expression of the second law of thermodynamics, and him explaining that it doesn't apply to Earth was captured on Ranty Flat Earth channel, I don't know, a couple of months ago.
Oh dear.
Yes, I will play the little clip in this section here. Edit. Cool. I'll play it just there, Nathan.
Do it for you if you want.
Perfect.
Do you want me to do it for you?
Yeah, do it now if you can.
That would be awesome.
If you can keep chit-chatting, I'll
no worries. No, and you can cut and shut it later when you edit it as well. You can.
That's right. I'll edit it in.
Stitch away. You can stitch away. Oh, that's brilliant.
Here you go.
Where have you got me on record saying that entropy doesn't apply to the Earth? I'd never say such a thing. The second law of thermodynamics does not apply to the Earth.
So Nathan, let's expand on that. Thanks for doing that. I've taken notes here about Boyle's law and vacuum in the sky. Can you just break it all down for those that have not really tried to argue this, gas pressure argument? Do you mind just going for it for us?
Sorry, where do you want me to start? Boyle's law?
Boyle's law and vacuum and gas pressure. If you can cover those things that people, don't realise that they're never going to win this particular argument. Would you mind explaining why they're never going to win?
Because you can't have gas pressure without a container. Sorry, I've lost you on camera now. I'm just going to see if I can figure out how to get you back on.
Yeah, no. And Mark Sargent gives you loads of kudos for that one statement, making it so simple. Because Mark's all about the sound bites on radio, so he's got to condense what he says to something really succinct. So you can't have gas pressure without a container. And Boyle's law was, again?
Well, you need to have Boyle's law apply. You're varying the size of the container to vary the pressure of the gas. Well, by implication, you've got to have a container for Boyle's law.
Yes. Okay. And remind everyone, what does entropy mean?
Well, it's the increase of the dispersion of energy. So entropy increase would be the increase of the dispersion of the entropy into the given volume that you've got. That's a very simplistic way of saying it. So hot always flows to cold. High pressure will always flow to low pressure. Those would be examples of entropy increase.
I see.
I have to give another shout out to Sleeping Warrior here. Had quite a deep conversation with him a few weeks back about entropy. I was just sitting there and a few things came to mind. And so if you haven't subbed to Sleeping Warrior already, give him a sub.
Getting enough shout outs, isn't he, Sleeping Warrior? It's like one big promo. He's good though.
Yeah, exactly. And let's do a few more shout outs for your panel. So we've obviously seen Arwin and Ranty for some time. Who else comes on the panel quite often?
So regulars at the moment, we've got Chocolate Saying. People who make shows more often are Arwin. So Arwin runs a regular show on Arwin's channel, which is ARWIJN, and he has the Flat Earth Early Bird, which goes out at 1 p.m. on our time, UK time. And so then after he finishes, the Flat Earth debate starts straight after his show. So it's like the precursor to the Flat Earth debate. And then, as we've already mentioned, Sleeping Warrior. So yeah, Sleeping Warrior, subscribe today. We've covered him probably enough already. Ranty Flat Earth, he's a regular on the show. So Ranty, who else we got? He does regular Travis, although we haven't seen him for a while. The Plain Truth. He's doing a lot with his P900 at the moment, out and about. He makes content. Mindwarp makes content. We've got Flatzoid who comes on. He makes content. There's a few of them. Have I missed Paul?
Spurs comes on.
Spurs comes on. Yeah, Spurs makes content. Paul. Yeah, there's loads of them.
Awesome.
10th Man.
It's the dream team.
The Meekin.
Adam Meekin, yeah. So worth shouting out IRM channel actually. So Iron Realm Media with Adam Meekin and all of those guys over there. So
happy. Yeah, they're awesome. So for those who've not been into the flat Earth debates in any great detail, you're very skilled, Nathan, at pulling apart all of the logical fallacies. Now, I've listed a load here. Do you mind? I know that it's like pupil teacher time, but just I know this is going to be really useful to the listeners. A lot of common techniques used by Globers is they'll use these logical fallacies to defend themselves, and some of the ones that people may not have heard of before, as maybe some of the common ones. So let's start with a couple of common ones. The appeal to authority. Do you mind defining what that is for us?
Yeah, sure. So I think the film Waterboy has got an example of this, where he goes to school and he tells the teacher that the alligator's annoyed because it's got all those teeth and no toothbrush, and the reason is because his mama told him. Well, that would be an appeal to authority, as opposed to going to someone that's got valid research. You're going to somebody that say, well, they're more important, they're higher up. So likewise, you could make it more complicated, where your manager is speaking on thermodynamics, and they might have a vaguest clue what that is, but because they're in charge, they've got to be right.
Yeah.
We'll skip past ad hominem because that's just a personal attack. How about you?
No, it's not. It's not just a personal attack. No,
isn't it?
That's not right.
Go for it then.
Yeah, I was going to say, go for it. Yeah.
So an ad hominem attack is more specific than just a personal attack, because I can just call you a dick, and that's not an ad hominem. That's an insult. So an ad hominem is where I offer an argument, and then rather than addressing the argument, you attack me personally in lieu of attacking the argument. So it's ad hominem at the man, but it means at the man as opposed to at the argument. So it's quite specific.
Okay.
That's really helpful. What about false dichotomy?
False dichotomy would be like I exampled earlier with your azimuthal equidistant projection. So the false dichotomy most rife in the flat earth community would be the false dichotomy between the representation of a space pizza versus a sphere. So that's a false dichotomy. Neither are representative of where we live. The map is not the terrain. That's called a reification fallacy. We do not live on a model. So to say, how does your model work? Well, that's irrelevant. Who cares? I don't live on a bloody model. So let's not compare how azimuthal equidistant projection compares to sphere model, which is actually where the projection came from anyway. But nevertheless, it's a false dichotomy. So saying it's either A or B. Let's pick which one's right based on their merits. Well,
correct.
No, it might be neither. In this case, neither, because we don't live on a model. So neither option's true, but you're told that you must pick A or B. False dichotomy.
Very good.
Brilliant.
How about equivocation? Is that one you've come across before?
Sure. Yeah, an equivocation fallacy is where you've got multiple definitions for something that are being used in the same instance. So at the moment, the equivocation fallacy that we get is where people will say the word mass, and they're trying to describe it when they're not just in loose colloquial terms, but they're trying to define it in something scientific. And when you're doing that, you've got to be very specific about what the definition of a word is. And with mass, you ask your opponent to define what it means, and they'll either give you the definition of inertia or they'll give you the definition of mole. Now, this is essentially an equivocation. That makes sense?
Okay. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, very good.
Awesome. For me, I wanted to ask about the circular argument.
Circular reasoning. Okay. Circular reasoning is essentially the same as begging the question. So if I was to use circular reasoning, it would be to say that I say the sky is a vacuum. Why? Well, go outside and look at the sky. That's circular reasoning. I say it's a sky vacuum, therefore, because I say it's a sky vacuum, it's a sky vacuum.
Yeah.
Circular reasoning can also be made more complicated. Have you got, as one of your questions, because I won't jump in if you've already got it on the list, but have you got the affirming the consequent in there? Is that one of your questions?
I wish I had, but go ahead anyway.
Okay. So
go ahead.
Circular reasoning is expanded out into a more complex logical fallacy called the affirming the consequent, which is a formal logical fallacy. In other words, it has to be formalized into this particular order. So you've got in the base structure, if P, then Q, Q, therefore P. So I'll give you a simple example, then I'll give you the globe head example. So if I eat 10 hamburgers, so if P, I eat 10 hamburgers, then I am full. Q being I am full. If I eat 10 hamburgers, P, I am full, Q. Then the affirming the consequent part. I am full, therefore I just ate 10 hamburgers, even though I've just eaten a pizza. So it's an affirming the consequent. So I'll give you an example with the begging the question fallacy rolled in, just because I'll break them both down, but just because it's a good example, because we hear it a lot. So if I am on a sphere, and in the example I'm about to give, this would usually utilize the word hemisphere. But if I am on a sphere, I will observe star rotation on the bottom of that sphere in whatever way I describe. Yeah. I observe star rotation in the south hemisphere. Therefore, the Earth is a sphere. So if P, then P is Earth is a sphere, and the Q is the observation of star rotation. It's also begging the question fallacy because the thing you're trying to prove in the example is Earth being a sphere. So the way the fallacy works is you first assume what you want to prove. So in my example, I want to prove that the Earth is a sphere. So if the Earth's a sphere, if the Earth's a sphere in my example, it's already a sphere. I've already assumed my outcome. So, but because it's more complicated than that, I first assume my outcome. I've got to drag it out to make this fallacy more complicated to those I'm putting it to. So if the Earth's a sphere, already begged the question, then I'll observe star rotation in the southern hemisphere, however I'm going to describe it to be. I do observe that star rotation, however I've described it's going to be. Therefore, Earth's a sphere. But the way it works is to have that observation, I first must assume that I travel from my position here, standing upright, and end up antipodal on the bottom of a sphere. So even though I'm travelling out to the horizon and perfectly level the entire way and observe no curvature, I'm going to assume for this example that when I arrive, I'm actually antipodal to where I start. So that's assuming the outcome in the example that uses star rotation to prove that the Earth's a sphere with, get to the point, the affirming the consequent formalised logical fallacy or formal logical fallacy. If P, then Q, Q, therefore P.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
What a
Thank
lesson.
you so much.
What a lesson.
It's all music to my ears. So I don't know about you, Robin, but for me, this is for me, it's crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's for most of the things I'm saying. I'm just now fine tuning a little bit of what I can't thank you enough for all of the work that you do and all the efforts that you put into this, because it genuinely is helping. I can't speak for everyone else, but it is helping the likes of me since I've been watching you guys and having input from Anthony, and I call them Rantony. Since I've had input from the guys, I can't tell you how much of a help it's been for me, because there's nothing worse than going out and having a conversation and leaving people with a false paradigm because you've not worded things properly. And I understand that the wording is so key, because if we word things wrong and we're taken out of context, that person does walk off thinking pizza dish in space.
Well, there's a couple of people to shout out in that regard, especially with logical fallacies. So Quantum Eraser, who's definitely a regular on the panel, I was waiting to give him a bigger shout out, more of a fanfare. So subscribe today to Quantum Eraser channel. He's
fantastic.
Excellent.
Good for you, mate.
Him and John Le Bon were probably the two people that gave me the most insight into logical fallacies. So while I was aware of logical fallacies, it wasn't something that was in the forefront of my mind until JLB highlighted it, and even to this day he's got hints and tips on his website, so johnlebon.com, in terms of how a logical fallacy is formed. He's got examples on there of things like the strawman fallacy that you can just watch or listen to his explanation of how that fallacy is broken down. And then further to that, Quantum Eraser, he's given me loads of new fallacies and how they work. So affirming the consequent, denying the antecedent, all of these things have actually come from Quantum Eraser, so I can't really take credit for them.
Awesome. So just for references, we'll put the links to John LeBon. Is that JOHNLEBON?
So JOHNLEBON.com. That's John LeBon. He's also got a YouTube channel, so he's just actually started again. So because he was talking about a school shooting or something of that nature, he lost a 7,000 strong channel. And I think he lost his backup channel as well. But nevertheless, he's now back up and running and probably got about 400 or 500 subscribers, which is a crying shame. But he's putting out a lot of content. And then the other one is Quantum Eraser, as you'd imagine it was spelled.
Great. Brilliant. We'll signpost everyone there. Great.
Did you get a chance to meet Dr. John at the convention, Nathan? Did you have?
No, I don't think I did. Did I meet Dr. John? No. I don't think so.
Oh wow. Well, because I'm just recounting now his various ripostes to Mick West and all the invitations he sent out to Simon, Dan, everyone to come and witness the Brighton experiments.
I was there. I didn't see any of them.
Yeah, they weren't there. So, yeah, I'm just maybe one day we could get him on the debate show and just anonymously, as in no face, just pop him on there and see if he'll come and join. But he definitely adds something to the debate for sure.
Maybe I should mention that as a plug to the show then. I mean, that is the exact format of the show. So each day that the show goes out, there's a link to, at the moment it's Discord that we're using, but that changes periodically. But at the moment you can just literally click on that link and join the show and express your views on the nature of Earth. So it's always been a public format where anybody can join. So my ambitions in terms of debating... Sorry, go on.
If someone was to, because we had a member of the Flat Earth Globe Denier community from Macedonia yesterday offer himself up. He's been researching and he's been a globe skeptic for about 50 years of his life. He's getting on a bit now. He's got a music studio. He's a bit of a musician, and he said he'll fight anyone. He'll fight anyone online. He'll take on anyone. He wants to debate anybody who is willing to debate him. However, he's somewhat censored out there because he's in Macedonia, and we were able to tell him about your platform. And he'll get a translator. English is not his strong point. However, arguing this topic is his strong point. And with a translator, he'd love to come on your panel and offer up whoever's up for the argument. And he's incredibly confident, Nathan. Incredibly confident. Grey hair. I think he had a ponytail as well, didn't he, Robin?
Yeah.
And he was tons of enthusiasm. And he's a content maker as well, and friends with Malenko. So it's the whole shebang. So yeah, you've got people across Europe wanting to get involved with the argument, because people feel they've got something to give. They've got their 2 cents worth to put in, and that really does help us for social acceptance of this subject, doesn't it?
Yeah, sure. But as I say, that is the way it's designed to run. So literally anybody can join. So I was just going to say that often people, because I run a debate show, say, I want to debate you over here or over there. And under somehow the impression that I give 2 craps about how they want to debate me when I offer up a public platform daily for anybody to join. So if people have ambitions in that regard to debate me, they can. It's offered up daily.
And you've got people that want to debate on your team, if that makes sense. They want to join your team and debate the opposition as well. And you're on the side of the camper van, so I'm assuming there's a lot more people across Europe that are going, what does that spell?
Yeah. Brilliant.
Love
cool stickers. I love it. Looked really good. All of them did.
Fantastic. So we're getting towards the end of our interview here, Nathan. I've got a couple more questions for you. We've covered things that I'd listed out I wanted to discuss. So the definition of pseudoscience. Have we covered that enough? Would you like to add to what you've said before?
Yeah, sure. Pseudoscience is simply a non-adherence to the scientific method where it's asserted to be science. So if you are saying, for example, that you observe a black hole and then say this is science, then no. Pseudoscience would be a non-application. So rather than observing natural phenomena, formulating hypothesis with independent and dependent variables, and then validating or invalidating that hypothesis through systematic experimentation, usually you have things like astrophysicists who might at best adhere to step 1 of that method, which is to say they can observe phenomena, but from there on in they just have just so stories to offer alongside rather than validated causal relationships, i.e. science. So those would be pseudoscientists, and the assertion that you have scientific validity when you have not adhered to the scientific method would be pseudoscience.
Thank you. And even quantum mechanics students don't know what the independent variable is, do they?
No.
So as Tony found out on the streets of Liverpool, which is really, really good. We've covered presupposed Earth radius, pressure without a container, angular resolution, perspective hijacking Earth curve. We've covered Boyle's law. We've covered diffraction limit. The one thing we haven't touched on was mirages. Give us the most ridiculous excuse of a mirage that you've had.
Well, the mirage is an interesting one, because this is probably one of my favourite points to make as a flat earther, especially when someone says there's no proof of flat earth. So I'll give you an example. We'll use Ranty and one of his images. So he has a picture of a clock tower at about 20 miles at Barrow-in-Furness, and it's just a picture of a clock. Now, as a flat earther, I look at this picture and say, clock at 20 miles. That's the end of my explanation. As a flat earther, I can make that statement. I'll say it again. Clock at 20 miles. Now, if you're a fundamentalist religious zealot, then that's not a clock at 20 miles. That would be a slightly looming, non-standard refraction hyena holographic projection of a clock from behind the reified edge of a sphere based on an R value and a begging the question proof of nothing perspective hijacking curve calculator to turn a clock which seems to be there into a clock which is not actually there. That's what you have to assert if you're a globehead. So it's not a clock, it's a holographic projection of a clock from behind the reified edge of an Earth curve based on a begging the question proof of nothing perspective hijacking curve calculator. As opposed to me, that's a globehead explanation. I say clock, 20 miles.
You're the man, Nath. You are the man. I love the way it's the way you taste, the way you say it. It's the way you say it. It's just you serve people like the Wimbledon final beautifully. It's poetry in motion. It genuinely is.
It is.
That's soundbite classic.
It is, and it reminds me of the P-Brain video of the guy trying to target ships on the horizon, and he's deciding whether to pull the trigger or not. It's at 9 miles, therefore calculation curve. It's 50 feet below the horizon. No, I can't pull the trigger on that one. Next, and he just decides not to shoot anything in the end because they're all too far away. Fantastic.
Love it.
Go for it, Roxanne.
Thank you. Can you tell us about your video, The How of the Globe Lie, Pseudoscience?
That was a recent one.
Okay. I mean, I can just sum it up in a few words. The way we've been lied to in terms of being convinced that we live on a sphere, it was summarised earlier when I described what pseudoscience is. So the way we've been lied to is by being told that science proves we're on a sphere. And back in 2014, 15, 16, 17, we were told the body of science proves sphericity. That's how we know we're on a globe. Well, it turns out 2017, 18, 19, that we're told science doesn't prove anything. And that's the turnaround that we've experienced. We've experienced being told that science proves we're on a globe to being told that science doesn't prove a thing. Now, the reality is science definitely does prove things. It proves or disproves a scientific prediction, otherwise known as a hypothesis. So it does prove things. There'd be no point in doing it if it didn't prove anything. We wouldn't do science if it didn't prove things. It proves or disproves your hypothesis. But we have the assertions of science from people who are actually practitioners in pseudoscience. And this understanding from us as flat earthers that science is on our side is going to be the difference between people reifying globes models into existence and people recognizing the nature of their reality. Science and its method is not on the side of the globe, and recognizing that pseudoscience practitioners are the ones that have lied to us under the banner of science is the recognition that the truth is actually on the side of flat earth, not the globe.
Fantastic. What a way to reach the end of our interview. But before we do, I just wonder, is there anything that you think we haven't asked you that you'd like to bring up, and particularly looking forward? You know, you've done nearly 1,000 shows now, Nathan, so congratulations on that. Is there anything about the format or the show or the way the conversation's going that you think still has to change, or you still want to make, you know, an impact? Because you're obviously knocking down all these arguments. Is there anything left?
Well, no, it's reached the point where we are concisely demolishing the globe assertions daily. It doesn't change the fact that there's always going to be people who want to challenge that. And in the last, or some recent shows, it's been the case that Johnny Normie or whoever, you know, normal guy comes in off the back of us talking about fairly benign subjects like Back to the Future and, you know, stuff that's subliminally or predictively programming you, stuff that sounds a bit conspiratorial or whatever. That's normally the lead-in for some Johnny Globehead to come in and start challenging us because we don't sound like we're on the ball. Use the pun. So I think that's never going to change. We're still going to have people who want to come and challenge what we say. It's always going to be the case. But in terms of the way that the production of the show is, I'm elated with it. You know, I'm over the moon that we got to 1,000 shows. And it's not that I want to get to number 1,000. I was saying this on the last few shows, literally in the last few days, that it's just that the fact that we've reached the point where we're at, you know, having debated about it for thousands of hours, and so concisely being able to take apart some of these assertions or logical fallacies is a wonderful place to be. Long may it continue. You know, I picked the format so that I could do it consistently and for a long time. You know, so long as we're in a society where the majority of us think we're on a ball, I'll still have a show and I want to be a YouTuber, so that's good for me, right? But I don't think there's anything that needs changing, especially. I'm very happy with the way it goes. If the 1,000th show goes out the way that today's show went out, I'll be over the moon.
Yeah. And another thing I just want to add as well, which is a bit random, but I do want to say this as well, because as well as giving out cards and leaflets, I don't know about you, Robin, but I definitely, when I'm having interactions with people and doing activism, when someone's gone back and forth with me for 35, 40, 45 minutes and they're still going, it's almost like they're behaving like people on your show, going, not having it. It's almost like the last ace card up my sleeve. And I go, well, if you really are not happy with the service you've received today and you really still think you're right, then please go ahead to our customer service department where you'll be chewed up and spat out. Good luck to you. Here's the link. May the best man win. And I know that because of those hundreds and hundreds of hours you guys have got under your belt, I'm like, well, are you going to be the person that's going to get us to all get our coats and we can just get on with our normie lives again because you're going to put us all back to sleep? Well, I'm going to get the popcorn out. I'm going to, you know, so many people are so self-sure of themselves with what they've been taught, not realizing we've all been taught the same thing and we were there where they were once. So again, I can't thank you enough for your selfless efforts and all of the time that you put into doing this, because you're so needed in this subject. For me, you're one of the pillar stones, like I said, one of the 5-star generals of truth. So I had to say it. I'm not worthy, Nath.
I'm blushing. Thank you very much. Both, very kind.
From us both, Nathan, we just want to acknowledge your absolutely monumental contribution for fighting on the front line of the debates and refining and improving the arguments for us and teaching us. It's been an epic set of battles and wins for the Globe Lite, pushing the envelope forward. So from us all, we thank you very, very much for your service to us all. You're very much appreciated, Nathan.
It's my pleasure. And to your audience, check it out, Flat Earth Debate. Links available, but come and watch, and it's definitely an entertaining show.
Big time.
Thank you. So the channel is Nathan Oakley 1980. That's where you can find Nathan's shows. Make sure you hit the bell and subscribe. And if there's anything else you want to say, Nathan, we will sign off.
No, I'm good. Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, my darling.
And let's finish with this amazing tune from the one and only Tell Me What You Love. It's called NASA Lies, Let Fall Your Denial. It's an epic tune.
Cool.
So thanks for tuning in, everyone. Until next time, be kind to yourselves and each other. We'll see you again soon.
Bye.
Thank you, Nathan. That was a really good interview. Really enjoyed it.
Is that it?
Perfect. That's it. It's a wrap.